Honourable members, I have received correspondence from the member for Arnhem as follows. I propose for discussion this day the following definite matter of public importance, recognising the outcome of the 2025 Australian federal election and the opportunities it brings for the Northern Territory. The letter is signed by the member for Arnhem. Is discussion supported? There are 4 members. Discussion is supported. I call the member for Arnhem.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the 3rd of May this year, 2025, it was a historic day for the country and for the Northern Territory. Around Australia, communities voted for fairness, aspiration and opportunity for all. Around Australia, communities voted for the strength to show courage and adversity and kindness to those in need. Thank you. Around Australia, communities voted for inclusion, not division. As a country, we chose optimism and determination over fear and division. Territorians voted for lower taxes, cheaper medicines, more bulk billing, more energy bill relief, more manufacturing in Australia, fee-free TAFE, and they overwhelmingly voted to bring the Port of Darwin back to Australian hands. Madam Speaker, they voted for an urgent care clinic for Darwin, a 120-bed aged care facility for Darwin, 2,700 houses over the 10 years for remote communities, $2.8 billion in road upgrades for the Territory over the next 10 years, creating 3,000 jobs in remote communities across Australia, more funding for ranger jobs to care for and protect country, $2 billion to fully fund Territory schools, $4 billion for remote housing and increased funding under the Northern Territory Remote Aboriginal Investment Agreement. Madam Speaker, Territorians rightly rewarded the Albanese Labor government for boosting hospital funding in the Territory by 30%, amounting to $560 million in the 2025-26 financial year, the largest percentage increase among all Australian jurisdictions. Territorians rewarded the federal Labor team for building 8 Medicare urgent care clinics in the Northern Territory, including Alikarung, Alingula, Galawinku, Lajawanu, Maningrida, Alice Springs, Palmerston and Warramayunga. Madam Speaker, these clinics have collectively handled over 50,000 visits, providing timely care and alleviating pressure on our hospital emergency departments in the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, Territorians overwhelmingly rejected nuclear power, instead backed in renewable energy. The nuclear policy championed by the CLP at this election was bizarre. Instead of backing in renewable energy projects like Sun Cable, the CLP advocated for a nuclear policy that would not have delivered an iota of energy for the Territory and would have raised power prices for all Territorians. Madam Speaker, the only thing we would have seen from the CLP nuclear policy is the waste that would have been dumped in the Territory. And Madam Speaker, I note that supporting nuclear remains the policy of the Country Liberal Party. With our critical minerals, our abundant sunshine and our desire to become a manufacturing hub for Northern Australia, the Territory can play a critical role in furthering the national ambition for renewable futures. And we have an abundant gas reserve, Madam Speaker, that will also be critical when it comes to this transition. We have a federal government who understands this, and we need the CLP, now that they're in government in the Territory, to join in with the rest of the country in supporting the transition to renewables, since they've recently scrapped the Northern Territory renewables target. Madam Speaker, Territorians also overwhelmingly rejected the high taxing agenda that the Liberal Party and the CLP advocated for. Madam Speaker, I found it quite frankly bizarre that the CLP championed a tax plan that would increase income tax for every single Territory worker. On our side of the chamber, Madam Speaker, we do believe in lower income tax for all Territorians, and I'm glad that Territorians and the rest of the country has agreed with us. Post the federal election, the Chief Minister made comments about the Territory getting special tax treatment. Her comments are strange, seeing as she wrapped herself around the Dutton tax plan that would see every Territorian paying more. Madam Speaker, the Chief Minister felt that Territorians should pay for the nuclear reactors by her enthusiastic support for higher taxes for Territorians, and this gives her no credibility when it comes to championing lower tax for Territorians. During the campaign, we saw our fantastic Senator and Cabinet Minister, Senator Mullendeary McCarthy, announce the first round of grants for the Remote Jobs and Economic Development Program. This program that helps replace the failed CDP program will create over 3,000 jobs in the next few years. In the first round of funding, Madam Speaker, we will see 140 jobs funded in Arnhem Land and Groote Eylandt, 100 jobs funded in communities around Central Australia, and 100 jobs funded in communities around the top end of the Territory and the Tiwi Islands. No federal government has done more to support the bush than the Albanese Labor government. Madam Speaker, these new jobs are in addition to the 300 roles created through the New Jobs Program trial. This investment is also on top of the funding provided to those who still need help becoming job ready. And the Albanese Labor government is also delivering on the second stage of replacing CDP, a $1.9 billion investment over 5 years for the Remote Australia Employment Service. Madam Speaker, these jobs will help to build skills, experience and contribute to closing the gap in employment outcomes, as well as contribute to remote communities and their economies. It is a disgrace that only the Labor Party is the government who will support these jobs and who support jobs in the bush and have fair wages to ensure fair conditions, including superannuation and annual leave. Madam Speaker, this investment is also on top of the investments made last October in 2024 by the Albanese Labor government, with more than 1,000 new Indigenous Ranger jobs being created across the country. We have just seen, Madam Speaker, this week, the government of the Northern Territory, the Country Liberal Party, break their election promise to Territorians in continuing to fund the Aboriginal Grants Program, which is a commitment they made in 2024, just last year, to try and win over voters in the Territory. And Madam Speaker, this is a massive blow to our hard-working rangers who work day in and day out, night and day, and often after hours on land and sea management right across the Northern Territory. Unlike the CLP, Madam Speaker, the Albanese Labor government understands just how important our Aboriginal Ranger groups are for economic development, for job creation and for environmental management across the Territory. Madam Speaker, the election result should also be seen as a rejection by Territorians of some of the far-right views that are creeping into our national politics. Territorians were horrified that the CLP campaigned on sacking 41,000 Australian public servants and on their plan to end the right of employees to negotiate with their employers to work from home. And I know that those opposite in the CLP government will claim that Peter Dutton backflipped on this policy mid-campaign. But why you can backflip on a policy when you realise it's poisonous electorally and you're not going to win the popular vote, which is obviously what he didn't do, Madam Speaker, you cannot backflip on your core beliefs. And that is what Australians and Territorians voted against. Territorians heard loud and clear that the CLP think that caring for your family and working in an office are a binary choice. According to the CLP in their campaigns, you can run a Treasury room from your tinny in the middle of a boat on a river. But if you have a child or if you care for a family member and you have a job in the Australian Public Service, you have to sit in an office. That says to me double standards and inconsistency, which we continue to see from the Country Liberal Party right now, Madam Speaker. And we all watched in horror, Madam Speaker, when the former Country Liberal Party Senator Jacinta Price stood up and told the rest of Australia that she would make Australia great again, in the Trumpism that is. We were perplexed, Madam Speaker, when she was appointed as the Shadow Minister for Government Efficiency, a clear carbon copy of the American Dodge model that has ripped through the US public service. Madam Speaker, the United States is a great country and among our closest allies, but what works in the US will not necessarily work in the Northern Territory. But we were truly horrified, Madam Speaker, when we looked at the CLP, how to vote, and saw once again, Madam Speaker, that the CLP had cut a shameful deal with One Nation Party and told Territorians that they feel that their values most align, secondly, with Pauline Hans's divisive party. Over the years and years and years, Madam Speaker, the division against First Nations people and our multicultural communities by the One Nation Party has been a slight on Australia's history and current and modern day politics. And Madam Speaker, the CLP should hold their head in shame for this shameful deal that they did on the preferences. Madam Speaker, the Territory is one of the most successful and amazing multicultural communities in the entire world. I truly believe that. And this Parliament, Madam Speaker, of the Northern Territory Legislative Assembly reflects that today. And we should be absolutely proud of that. The role of our multicultural communities, the role of our First Nations people, and the role of women in playing to build the territory that we have today and to legislate for the territory of tomorrow. Madam Speaker, it is unbelievable that once again the CLP have decided to align themselves with a political movement fiercely articulated by Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party of division. The party who has said that Asians have swamped Australia. The party that has said that Islam is a disease and that we need to vaccinate ourselves against. The party that has said South African migrants are riddled with AIDS. Disgusting, Madam Speaker. More shockingly, this is the CLP government of today who wants to align themselves with these type of values and add the Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party as their second choice for Territorians. Is this really what the CLP government reflects and the values? Madam Speaker, that's what the voting card would tell us. Every corner of the country and every corner of the territory rightly pushed the Liberal National Party coalition out of the way, and this is for cuddling up to the far-right activists, and I will leave it for others to investigate why so many members of the Brethren Church and Freedom Party, with their questionable views about women, about First Nations people and about multiculturalism, were running around the whole of the Northern Territory and in some cases flying around the Northern Territory wearing an orange shirt to represent the Country Liberal Party of today, Madam Speaker, to try and get Lisa Bayliss elected for Solomon, to try and get Lisa Siebert elected for Lingiari, and to try and get Jacinta Price as the Senate position, and her running mate, Dean Hersey, the husband of the member for Katherine, Madam Speaker. This federal election was also the worst result for the CLP in the Territory. When the final count is done, not a single member of the CLP will be elected from the Territory. The results show that there will be 3 members from the Territory Labor federal team and 1 Liberal from the party, 0 that claim to be CLP. Madam Speaker, I would like to take a moment to congratulate all of the candidates who did contest the election in Lingiari, Solomon and in the Senate. Win or lose, it takes a special type of dedication to put your hand up to run for Parliament, whether it's here in the Territory or indeed in our nation's capital. Madam Speaker, our democracy is richer for everyone who's participated in it. So, regardless of the type of values, thank you to Territorians for wanting to represent other Territorians at that national level. Madam Speaker, in the Senate, Mullindiri McCarthy was elected in the first spot with the overall Territory Labor vote increasing in the Senate. And once again, she was elected without preferences and is likely the only candidate to receive a quota in their own right. I want to take the moment to acknowledge and thank Mike Aislop, who ran the second ticket on Labor's Senate card, Madam Speaker. In Lingiari, across the electorate, Marion Scrimgeour received a massive swing towards her. This was even more impressive considering that prior to the election, Lingiari was one of the most marginal seats in the country. Madam Speaker, the results in Alice Springs and Barkly were particularly telling. At some booths in Alice Springs, Marion saw a 10% swing towards her, and in Tennant Creek, she saw a massive 15% swing towards her. On a 2-party preferred basis, 56% of Alice Springs chose Labor over the CLP. And I note in booths in Breitling and Namatjira, the figure were higher than this, Madam Speaker. While in Tennant Creek, 60% chose Labor over the CLP, Madam Speaker. And despite a similar number of people voting in the bush compared to the 2022 election, across the bush we saw voters in strong numbers come out and support Marion and the great Australian Labor Party. Madam Speaker, the CLP should look at these results, as we have done with Territory Labor, and start to dissect and reflect on their position. And Madam Speaker, if we're talking about areas that actually make a difference for Territorians, the divisiveness will never pay off, and that is what the CLP led with, and it failed them spectacularly, Madam Speaker. So they may need to rethink some of their complete and utter lack of consultation, their disdain and disregard for Aboriginal, Territorians and First Nations issues, and when it comes to communities, and particularly the further away you get from town, our remote communities, the matters that massively impact on the lives of those fellow Territorians, take a moment to reflect and truly do your job as government here in the Northern Territory and consult, learn, listen and be agile to be able to change legislation so it will better all Territorians and not just a few hand-picked CLP supporters. Madam Speaker, in Solomon, once again, we saw Luke Gosling win the seat, a fourth record time. With all of the investment he secured for the NT, he should be very proud. And it was a tight race, Madam Speaker. We all know that. That's not a new piece of information in this House. But we, of course, note that there was that swing against Labor in the seat of Solomon. And there will absolutely be lessons from Territory Labor from it. However, the results should be placed in the context which the campaign was fought. And 9 months ago, Madam Speaker, at the Territory level, Labor was wiped out. We know that. The Territory seats that cover Solomon. And in 2012, when the CLP won government in the Territory, they also won Solomon shortly afterwards. And in 2016, the seat was won by Luke Gosling shortly before Labor won the Territory election. Solomon has always been a marginal seat, with a few exceptions, Madam Speaker, in the Territory's history, but it has also been the bellwether set to assess public sentiment with the Northern Territory government of the day. So, for the reasons others can explain, Madam Speaker, the CLP decided to make the seat of Solomon a referendum on the Finocchiaro CLP government. And I did not see a single piece of material put out by the CLP that had Peter Dutton's face on it or referred to Peter Dutton as the National Liberal Coalition leader. I think they saw the writing on the wall and they chose to try and pull him away from the Territory CLP federal campaign. Instead, Madam Speaker, the CLP made the choice in Solomon clear. They told voters that if you think Leah Finocchiaro is doing a great job as the CLP Chief Minister, then vote for Lisa Bayliss, a strategy that they actually rolled out in both the Lingiari and Solomon seats. Every Darwin and Palmerston-based CLP member signed on to this strategy, Madam Speaker. They spent hours away from their own communities and their own electorates and hung out at pre-polls. Even the member for Barkly signed up to this, and it was hardly in his own electorate of Barkly and barely present in Tennant Creek, his hometown. And it was not lost on Territory Labor how much time the member for Barkly spent in Parap here in Darwin on election day. Quite a strange decision, Madam Speaker. I know the member for Barkly in opposition used to talk so much about the Berrima line, but perhaps he's forgotten about the Berrima line himself, but from the reverse position. Madam Speaker, maybe the member for Barkly could have had a good luck charm for Luke Gosling because he comfortably won Parap, Ludmilla and the Darwin City booths on the primary count overall and the final two candidates' preferred count, Madam Speaker. And likewise, Luke Gosling and Labor won every booth in the northern suburbs of Darwin that is currently held by a CLP member. Very interesting. In just 9 short months, Madam Speaker, Territorians who supported Leah Finocchiaro to become the Chief Minister completely turned their back on her when she asked them to add Lisa Bayliss to their team. It was a complete and utter failure by the Chief Minister. Madam Speaker, Lisa Bayliss was an incredibly strong candidate, and I know comes from a long line of well-distinguished CLP politicians, and is absolutely well regarded and respected for her work as an individual and, of course, her decades' worth of service to the public and the time that she has given to the service of the force to serve and protect us here in the Northern Territory. So I'm not questioning her individual commitments to the Northern Territory. But, Madam Speaker, I will question something that I'm sure philosophers will spend a bit of time on. And now that the CLP can reflect, and we can all reflect, I pose this. The philosophers, Madam Speaker, may ask, had the CLP not put Leah Finocchiaro on the call flutes of the candidates, so Lisa Bayliss in particular, could that have spoke volumes around the advertisement that perhaps maybe we may see the different result in Solomon had Leah Finocchiaro and her leadership not been on display for the federal election? And it was quite interesting, Madam Speaker, because anyone looking at those call flutes would have thought that Leah Finocchiaro was going for the federal leadership role. But of course, we've seen some of the backlash of the recent moves of Senator Jacinta Price, who changed her party room a couple of days after the election loss and wipeout of Peter Dutton and the National Liberals, and was not even left a deputy position in either party room.
Member for Goyder, the birthday boy.
The birthday boy. Madam Speaker, we are today talking about the federal election once again at the urging of an MPI from the Labor Party. Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition cares more about what is happening in Canberra, Victoria and New South Wales than she cares about what's happening in Nightcliff, Grey, Arnhem Land, Alice Springs, Nhulunbuy, Tennant Creek or the rural area. What a joke, Madam Speaker. They are more concerned at feathering their own nests in their future Senate races to replace McCarthy, or in the case of the future opposition leader, the seat of Lingari. What a joke. Instead of speaking about our rising road toll, especially in the member for Daly's electorate, given that it is National Road Safety Week and we have lost more Territorians' lives in the last 2 weeks than we have at any other period this year. Or perhaps we could be talking about the International Day of Families, given how important strong families are to reducing poor health, social and economic outcomes for Territorians. Or how it's 100 days out to the NT local government elections. And Madam Speaker, I know your history with council there. Local government is a foundation of the Territory, and we could be talking about how important it is that people put their hands up and think about running. Or perhaps we could talk about any other topical issue that is affecting the Northern Territory or constituents in their electorates. We could be talking about the concerns of the member from Arafura's electorate or the member for Guadja's electorate, but instead we're talking about federal politics. We're reading a script provided to us by Anthony Albanese's team so that we can spruik him in the NT Parliament. To all our lovely listeners and viewers here, I know there are many millions watching the live stream right now, and I know they're appreciating the deep, meaningful content coming out of the Leader of the Opposition's mouth. But Madam Speaker, we're talking about this federal politics thing. Now, Solomon has had a federal Labor member for 9 years, Madam Speaker. Darwin Palmerston, the boundaries have changed back and forth a little bit, but Darwin Palmerston has had a federal Labor member for the last 9 years. And what do we have to show for it, Madam Speaker? Now, Madam Speaker, I ask you, when you visit Darwin, can you find Audi? I can't find Audi. No matter where I look, whenever I drive around the northern suburbs, and I hate driving this far into town, I can't find Audi. Now, Madam Speaker, who can forget when Gosling yelled at Katie Wolf about Audi? He was very passionate about Audi, and I can't find it. What a joke. It's almost as big a joke as this MPI tonight. But while we were being held here, captive by the failed opposition, I may as well run through some statistics around, and hopefully those opposite can at least pretend to understand the numbers. We all know they couldn't understand previous budgets or financial management, but maybe, just maybe I can explain some numbers to them today. Madam Speaker, in every state and territory across the country, there was a two-party preferred swing to Labor, except the Northern Territory. In every territory electorate contained within Solomon, there was a primary vote and a two-party preferred swing to the CLP. Madam Speaker, in the electorate of Blaine, there was a 6% primary swing. There was a 9.7% primary swing in Brennan. In Casuarina, which is represented by a fantastic local member who's very passionate, we heard today about Casuarina. The member for Casuarina is a strong advocate for his electorate. We had a 9.9% primary swing in Casuarina and a 6.6% two-party preferred. In the member for Drysdale's electorate, those booths had a 12% primary swing and a 9.74% two-party preferred swing. It is working. We are doing well. Who can forget that only 9 months ago, Madam Speaker, that electorate was represented by the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory for the Labor Party? And now we're getting big swings to the CLP in that booth. Madam Speaker, in the electorate of Fanny Bay, which is represented by a fierce advocate for those northern people up in Fanny Bay, we have a 6% primary and a 2.3% two-party preferred. In Fong Lim, represented by the doctor, we have a 13.7% primary swing and a 7.4% two-party preferred. I could go on, but the one more that I will pick out is that the member for Karama, the fierce advocate, the member for Karama, he achieved big swings in his booths. He had a 10.43% primary swing in Karama and a 7.63% two-party preferred in booths that are traditionally Labor-dominated, Madam Speaker. These were normally 65-35 booths, and we've pulled them right back, Madam Speaker. In the Chief Minister's electorate of Spillett, we had an 8.88% primary swing to the CLP, Madam Speaker. In Solomon pre-poll, every single Solomon pre-poll booth, there was a primary and two-party preferred swing to the CLP. In every other category of voting, including absent, provisional, pre-poll and postal, there was a swing to the CLP. And just for the interested people at home, there was also a voter turnout drop of 1.23% in Solomon, which is always incredibly disappointing, but I'll touch on that a bit later. Now, back to the federal election that Labor thinks is more important than any issue affecting the Territory today. The Northern Territory had in the seat of Solomon, there was a 7.2% swing against Labor, when federally there was a 2.8% swing to Labor. Now, what that tells me, Madam Speaker, is there's very likely a little bit of federal drag that's happening, and perhaps people didn't resonate with the messaging of the federal campaign, but you can't use it as a justification that somehow Luke Gosling is doing a good job. Now, coming into the election, Luke Gosling was the 32nd most marginal Labor seat. Instead of an election where Labor picked up 16 seats, Mr Gosling now has the 6th most marginal seat in the country. The member for Solomon, Luke Gosling, let's not forget, on the 2nd of May, he told the NT News, and I quote, "I'm really happy with the support I have from the Prime Minister, and he certainly indicated to me that he sees me in an assistant ministerial position after this election." Well, it turns out if you perform badly and almost lose the seat, Madam Speaker, you don't get any rewards. Now, Madam Speaker, perhaps without the federal drag, we would have won Solomon and had a great local member who cared about the Territory instead of trying to position themselves for a ministry after failing for 9 years to demonstrate any leadership. Now, Madam Speaker, let's talk about my seat and your seat, the seat of Lingari, and perhaps one of our Labor opposition could please remind the member that the Darwin rural area is part of her electorate. Madam Speaker, at every booth in the Northern Territory in the rural area, there was an overall swing to the CLP. Now, Madam Speaker, on the 12th of May, the member for Lingari, she said on her Facebook, and I quote, "The bush spoke loud and clear last Saturday." And the Senator McCarthy, she said, "Remote communities turned out to vote in support for Labor." And Madam Speaker, I've heard the reports of what's been going on out in the bush, and I'm incredibly disappointed by the federal member's response. Madam Speaker, the Labor Party treats the bush with utter contempt and straight up misleads voters out there by telling misleading statements after misleading statements. They will straight up, I think I'm allowed to say the word lie in this context, I'm not referring to a member in this chamber, but they will lie to voters out in the bush. And Madam Speaker, let's talk about the turnout in the bush. Lingari only had 61. I pick up on the Leader of the Opposition's objection. It is pathetic that they do lie to the people out in the bush. Now, Lingari had a 61.15% voter turnout, Madam Speaker. In real terms, the number of people voting in this federal election in Lingari fell by 1,500 voters, Madam Speaker. That's not something to be proud of. That's not the bush coming out to vote. Now, Madam Speaker, I know those opposite love low voter turnout in the bush. Perhaps without it, they wouldn't be sitting here today. Let us run through the numbers quickly from the Territory election that left us with 4 lonely opposition members in this chamber. Madam Speaker, the member for Gwodja was elected on a 42.1% voter turnout. 57.9% in his electorate didn't even vote in the last Territory election. He was elected by 26% of his electorate, Madam Speaker. The member for Arafura had 44.6% voter turnout in his electorate, having won the seat on the back of only 30% of his enrolled voters. I've got to remember to breathe. The member for Arnhem, our esteemed opposition leader, who would rather spend her time in this chamber talking about the federal election than her own electorate, won her seat with 52% voter turnout, with only 32% of the vote. Now, Madam Speaker, I won my seat with more than 50% of the enrolled voters in my electorate, either voting for or preferencing me. Now, Madam Speaker, the member for Lingari also posted to social media on the 10th of May a question to the Treasurer asking about the road to Santa Teresa when it will be sealed by the NT government. Madam Speaker, she sat silent while Labor sat on the federal money for that project and many other projects, including the road between Wadeye and Palumpa, the money on the Tiwi Islands for roads there, as well as other projects in the bush. Now, Madam Speaker, I hope one day we will have a federal member for Lingari and that the territory that doesn't just play gutter politics but instead will work with the NT government to progress the territory. Madam Speaker, I'm an active member of my community and I have been for a number of years, even before I was elected to Litchfield Council in 2021. Now, and yet, despite that, Madam Speaker, I've been to as many events as possible under the sun in the rural area, which is part of Lingari, and in the last 4 years, I have seen the member for Lingari a grand total of 5 times, including yesterday, Madam Speaker. Rural Territorians in the Greater Darwin area, we deserve to have federal representation. Instead, we're told that the only vote that mattered was the 50% or the 30% of people in the bush that vote, and not the 80% of people who vote in the rural area. And Madam Speaker, we do need to work with our federal counterparts. I'm not going to sit up here and pretend that we don't need to work with the Anthony Albanese Labor government, and I acknowledge their successes are our successes, Madam Speaker. It takes 2 to tango, and especially in the case of the Territory, we need it. A large percentage of our funding does indeed come from the federal government. And Madam Speaker, this CLP government is the government that is unlocking our federal funding and making sure the infrastructure projects are actually being delivered. Rather than going out to Wadeye and telling them every year, the road's coming next year, the road's coming next year, the road's coming next year, the Treasurer, our esteemed member for Namatjira, he said, you know what, we're just going to build the road. We're going to make it happen, because we could go out there and we could promise, vote CLP and we'll do it next year and next year and next year. Instead, what we've done is we've said we're just going to build it because we know it will improve the lives of Territorians, Madam Speaker. Why would we just sit on money and not spend it? It doesn't make sense, Madam Speaker. We should be delivering for Territorians. And instead, on this lovely Thursday, on my birthday, Madam Speaker, we're going to get in here and we're going to talk all about federal politics instead of what Territorians actually care about, Madam Speaker. Now, I guarantee you that there may be somebody listening tonight, and maybe Luke Gosling is listening tonight, and he thinks this is a very interesting topic and he's quite pleased with himself. But, Madam Speaker, the majority of Territorians, they care about the cost of living, they care about the crime, they care about what they're going to do on the weekend, they care about whether or not it's safe to go to work tomorrow. They do not care that they have another goose for 9 years in Solomon, another 3 years in Lingari. And, you know, Madam Speaker, I went to the Fred's Pass markets 2 weekends ago, the weekend after the election. It's a lovely market. I highly recommend it. If you're free Saturday morning, you should go on down, buy some chickens, drop them at someone's house because you probably can't take them on the plane. You know, get a food. If the rugby's on, the polo cross, I know the member for Nelson loves his polo cross. Go out there, you know, see what's going on. Lovely market. And, Madam Speaker, there was a Labor tent set up the weekend after the election. And I thought to myself, and I was like, this is incredible. Right, Madam Speaker? This is the last time I will ever see a Marion Scrimgeour tent at the Fred's Pass markets. We all know she's not going to run again, Madam Speaker, and I didn't see her any time between the last election and this one. It's incredibly disappointing to know that the federal member doesn't even care about your region at all. Madam Speaker, we were promised $10 million by Damien Ryan in 2020 and 2021 for Fred's Pass Reserve to build netball courts and have lights and everything in Fred's Pass. It was going to be a great $10 million package. And, Madam Speaker, Marion, to her credit, the Labor Party did match that commitment. And, Madam Speaker, if you go out to Fred's Pass markets this Saturday, which I still recommend you do if you're not going home, and let me know, I can be there, I can show you where my favourite smoothie van is. Now, Madam Speaker, go for a drive around Fred's Pass and point to me the netball courts. Show me where they are, Madam Speaker, because they don't exist. It's just another promise. I'm told plans have been done up. I'm also told there was a lot of interfering in the Labor member's office with what the designs had to be and which sports her grandkids play and all of that. But one last thing I want to touch on, Madam Speaker, and this is publicly available information on the Australian government's website. As you may be aware, Madam Speaker, the parliamentarians in the Northern Territory of those who were elected before 2005, they had access to an NT parliamentary salary, right? In return for the assumption that you wouldn't go on to be a lobbyist, if you served 3 or 4 terms, you were entitled to a pension. And I know there's quite a few former members who have benefited from this scheme. In 2005 or thereabouts, they decided against it in the Territory. Now, Madam Speaker, the member for Lingari was elected to the Legislative Assembly in 2001 to 2012, and she qualified for this scheme. And if you go to the federal website for members' interests, you can see as an income source, the member for Lingari is still claiming her NT-MLA pension, which I'd assume is worth a significant amount of money. And over the last 10 years, and the last 3 when she's been in a federal parliament, I'd hate to think what she's costing the NT taxpayer and the NT's budget while still collecting a $200,000 federal salary, still in public life, but it's still on that declaration. She is still claiming it, Madam Speaker. And if I care about the Territory's economy, and I do care about the Territory's economy, I do wonder, would we be better off having a federal member sitting there not doing anything for the Territory, or would we be better off having that money back in our products? And I pick up on the Leader of the Opposition's objections because she's hoping one day, Madam Speaker, they might pre-select her for something, but unfortunately, Leader of the Opposition, you probably won't even do the budget reply next year. The man behind you probably will. It's incredible, Madam Speaker, that she's still interjecting. She's wasted our time tonight with an MPI on the federal election. She could be talking about her constituents. She could be talking about what's going on in the bush. She could be talking about investments that she'd like to have seen. She could have been talking about her budget reply. She could have been talking about the member for Arafura's electorate, all the upcoming great events. We could be doing lovely adjournments, the little Johnny
leader.
speeches.
Come on.
Instead, we're having her
Silence.
yell out uncontrollably, Madam Speaker, without the backing of her 3 Labor members. It's quite sad to see, Madam Speaker. At least I know when I get up, I have the full support of my 16 CLP colleagues in this chamber. And Madam Speaker, I just want to reiterate one more time. There's going to be a lot of people, there's a lot of talk about this being somehow a referendum. Now, federal politics and Territorians are smart enough to know the difference between Territory and federal politics. And I hate this idea that people think that local government can be compared to Territory, can be compared to federal. Now, don't get me wrong, I did great in my local government elections, Madam Speaker, and I did great in the Territory election, but I think that's more to do with me than politics. Now, but... And, for example, Madam Speaker, there were wonderful swings towards the CLP where it was already quite strong in the member for Catherine's electorate there. And I know she was a proud advocate for change because if I've seen the member for Lingari 5 times in the last 4 years, I hate to think how many times my good friend, the member for Catherine, has seen her. It's very sad indeed, Madam Speaker.
Opposition
Now,
leader,
with the last 3 minutes, Madam Speaker,
silence, please.
do you think the Territorians who care about the idea that, oh wow, they put One Nation as their second preference, or Madam Speaker, they put the Greens as their 5th preference, or Madam Speaker, they put this party or that party? I'll teach you one day how preferences work, and when you vote for the CLP in the Northern Territory, I guarantee you we make that top 2, because we made the top 2 in every single seat. Every single seat we contested at the Territory election, Labor didn't. I hate to think what poor Mr Bowden is doing there, the former member for Johnston, because he couldn't make the top 2, Madam Speaker, but I certainly did. He certainly did. He certainly did. All the members on this side certainly made that top 2, Madam Speaker. Whereas many of your former colleagues who are probably wondering, I really wonder if the Senate will be retiring soon because I need a job again. But it's sad to see, Madam Speaker, that for the last time, I'll only say it another 6 times to get the 2 minutes out of the way, because if they're going to waste my time, Madam Speaker, I may as well waste theirs. But, Madam Speaker, there were so many other topics we could be talking about tonight. There are so many other things. We could be talking about mental health, Madam Speaker.
Leader,
to me, I would love to see the opposition bring an MPI about mental health so we can have the real conversations in this chamber about what affects Territorians. And, Madam Speaker, I pick up on the objections from the Leader of the Opposition thinking that mental health is a shame job. And I think that is absolutely appalling, Madam Speaker. I think that is absolutely appalling.
Take your seat, Member for Goyder. What's your point of order?
Misleading, and that is not what I said, so I asked the member to withdraw because Standing Order 31, I find that offensive, that my words be taken out of context
Look,
by the member for Goyder, deliberately trying to mislead territory.
Everyone sit down. Leader of the Opposition, you have been interjecting pretty consistently for the last 20 minutes almost. I'm not going to ask anyone to withdraw anything because I think your behaviour has been unacceptable. Whatever you said, I didn't really hear it. I wasn't paying attention. I was probably more listening to the chitter-chatter over here by the Opposition Leader. You've got 58 seconds to go. Let's keep it clean and you will be heard in silence.
Madam Speaker, as I'd like to say one last time, we could have been using this method, this mechanism in our Parliament, Standing Order 66, the discussion of a matter of public importance, to be talking about something that's actually important to Territorians, Madam Speaker. We could have used this 2 hours talking about something productive. Instead, I'm going to hear the script written from Millenderia McCarthy's office, and I'm going to hear the script from Luke Gosling's office, and we're going to hear the script from some Labor staffer that wrote this poor speech trying to find something relevant about Luke Gosling's near loss. And Madam Speaker, I personally care more about what's happening in the Territory. That's why I wear my Territory flag with pride. I care more about what's happening in Humpty Doo, Acacia, or Nightcliff and Grey, or Arnhem Land, Nullarbor, Tennant Creek in the rural area, than what's happening in Canberra, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Your time has expired. Member for Gwadja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I think we have descended into a very unfortunate position. But I do think that the matter of public importance should be framed more about the acknowledgement that there has been an election, and certainly that the Commonwealth Government, regardless of who they are absolutely a major player for the Northern Territory Government, Madam Speaker. 71% of the Northern Territory's budget or thereabouts is Commonwealth funded. So Madam Speaker, I haven't interjected on anyone for the purposes of this MPI, and I think, look, let's just keep the rest of the evening respectful and not interject on each other. What I will say is, Madam Speaker, that yes, this is incredibly important, and we should be acknowledging that with this election certainly comes a whole range of opportunity and investment for the Northern Territory. And it's good investment. And look, I'll absolutely acknowledge there were a number of investments on both sides that had the opportunity to really deliver for the Territory. But I particularly just wanted to acknowledge and highlight that there are some really good investments coming through that will go through to the Northern Territory Government to deliver, and there are some investments that will go directly to organisations and to everyday Australians who call the Territory home. Particularly for me, being a bush member, Madam Speaker, I do want to acknowledge that come the 1st of June, there is a Commonwealth subsidy for remote food in remote community stores. That is in outback stores, that is in independent stores, right across the bush. This is really important, and this is about remote communities having access to subsidised quality foods, but it's also about pastoralists who access those remote community stores, and it's about travellers. So that was a commitment to have town prices in remote community stores. And that was, again, an important initiative that had been driven by the Commonwealth Government to address those items. And there are something like 32 items that are going to be subsidised, and that they will be monitored to make sure that there is a reduction and that they are in line with town prices. And, Madam Speaker, that is important because that goes to addressing a number of concerns people have about health. We've, of course, got the ongoing commitment of the National Partnership on Remote Housing, again, and a national partnership agreement between the Commonwealth and the Territory Liberal Government, and that's an important investment to keep going forward. There's the roads investment, again, great investment. The Territory is going to be a winner under those investments. Madam Speaker, these are certainly important that we can continue to do. I know that there's a whole range of work being done on a Commonwealth level, and ministers in this Parliament will be working with those Commonwealth ministers to deliver important reform and investment for the Northern Territory. I do just want to acknowledge a few comments that have been made tonight in the chamber in relation to the bush. The bush is a wonderful place. It's filled with lots of passion, lots of energy and lots of resilience. If the member for Goyder wants to make accusations about treatment of people, then that should be referred to the Australian Electoral Commission to ensure that a proper and thorough investigation can be undertaken. Madam Speaker, we are Territorians. We are incredibly proud of who we are. We don't need people coming up, putting on orange shirts and telling people what to do. And I find that quite offensive and insulting that there is... I find that quite offensive and insulting that there is a position that has been taken that Aboriginal Territorians are somewhat incapable of making a decision for who they vote for. That is so insulting. Whether Aboriginal people wanted to vote for the Labor Party, for the Liberal Party, that's their choice. That's their democratic right. But to make that assertion and that assumption that they are not capable of doing that is offensive, and I think that that behaviour needs to be called out. And if there are instances where people believe that there has been a misconduct, it absolutely needs to be reported and substantiated. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to absolutely acknowledge tonight every candidate that ran in the federal election, because it takes guts regardless of who you are and what party you represent. You put yourself on the line, and it is a big thing. And what we did see, regardless on both sides of politics, left and right, Labor and Liberal, independent, minor parties, was level of treatment of people's property in the damage that was done to people's core flutes and the insulting things that were written on people. That's not the territory that we know, and that's not the territory that we want to be a part of. So there is certainly electoral reform work that should be done in this space, Madam Speaker. But I want to acknowledge certainly Senator Mulundiri McCarthy and congratulate her. It's so wonderful to have a territory person be the federal Aboriginal or Indigenous Affairs Minister, because I know that she's going to deliver progressive reform. I want to also acknowledge Hugh Kenny, who ran as an independent from Mbantua down there, Hermansburg community, again, was there in the communities talking to people. Now, when we talk about this, Madam Speaker, I want to acknowledge Labor does well in the bush because Labor actually cares about the bush. Now, if there's going to be comments in here about people treating people, doing this and doing that, I want to make it really clear that in so many communities across the Northern Territory that I have been out to, or that I knew people were out there for the election, there was not a single CLP person who even bothered to turn up on the day of the election in those remote communities to provide, to be there, to talk about their policies. They did not even care about remote Aboriginal communities, Madam Speaker. So let's just be very clear here. Now, I want to also acknowledge and congratulate Marion Scrimgeour, a great campaign run and a really solid and firm advocate for the Northern Territory. Now, the electorate of Lingiari is an amazing electorate. It's the second largest electorate in the Northern Territory. 1.3 million square kilometres, takes in the Cocos and Keely Islands as well, Christmas Islands as well, Madam Speaker. A huge electorate. Regardless of who has that seat, you are on the road constantly. I think my electorate's big, the largest electorate in the Northern Territory. The member for Barclay, second largest electorate in the Northern Territory. We are on the road every minute we get travelling, and our electorates are not even half the size of the electorate of Lingiari. So I want to acknowledge the hard work that gets done. Marion Scrimgeour delivered significant investments for the Northern Territory, and I want to thank her for that. I also want to acknowledge Lisa Siebert, because that poor woman was out on the campaign, often by herself, often doing the hard work, and after the election, the CLP dropped her like a hotcake. Poor thing, left in Alice Springs. And I also want to acknowledge the media. After the election, couldn't even be bothered to go and talk to her about her position on the election, her feelings, her thoughts. Gone, like she never even existed. She is a person. And nobody has bothered to check in with her. She ran a hard campaign, but she still deserves some respect. And we all need to acknowledge the work that she done. Yes, Auntie Marion won the campaign and she did a bloody good job and she's going to be a bloody good member. But there are other candidates who ran as well and they get lost for other people. Why? Because the spotlight all went to Senator Price to see what hateful things she was going to say about other people and what culture wars and politics she was going to play. Completely overlooked a reasonable, true blue Territorian Lisa Siebert to feed a political narrative and feed these culture wars. Australia needs to move on from these culture wars and we need to come back together. Now, I know we're not all going to agree. We're definitely in this parliament. We're all on different sides of the political spectrum. But we need to use, regardless of what our position is, we need to use the federal election as a moment to draw a line in the sand and try and walk forward together so that we're not getting involved in this divisive nature. Because I know this federal election was very hard for many people in the Northern Territory. And I want to say this, Madam Speaker, we are not America. We are so much better. We are the greatest country in the world. We are Australian. We are amazing. We are many cultures. We have the world's oldest living culture. We do not need to run politics like Americans. We need to run politics like Australians, where everyone gets a fair go and we can have functions and dinner parties and spend time with our families and not be so caught up in the polarisation of who we are and what we believe in. I am a Labor member. I was the Deputy Chief Minister of a Labor government. My family, some of them vote Liberal, some of them vote Independent, some of them I don't even know if they vote, but I tell them to so they don't get a fine. But Madam Speaker, that's the beauty of the Australian way. We should actually still believe in one another and still support one another. People say to me all the time, why do you talk to that person? They're a Tory or they're CLP. Well, if I didn't talk to CLP members, I probably wouldn't talk to a lot of people I know, Madam Speaker. But here's the thing. We have to work together. We have to talk together. We have to understand what each other is saying. We often want to get to the same destination, but the road we take is different. So, Madam Speaker, I'm not going to spend this MPI on saying who's better than who or whatever, or what election results is this and that. The fact is we all need to work together. We have an election coming up in 3 years' time, and I know some of us are like exhausted even thinking about it, but how do we grow our democratic principles and participation right across the territory? There are so many people who feel disengaged from both sides. So how do we engage people to participate in elections so that they feel more involved, Madam Speaker? Because that's some of the issue that we are seeing, is people just don't feel like voting anymore. So how do we grow that? We do have local government elections coming up in 100 days. And I know, as the former local government minister and as old mate across there, my mate, the member for Barclay, we come from local government, as does the member for Araluen, as does the member for Goyder. We know local government is really important. What we want to do in that election, because that is not where party politics has any place in local government, is grow participation in those elections. Now, I'm sure there'll be a whole bunch of people in Alice who are going to run over the scandal of the Sturt Desert Pea. But, you know, Madam Speaker, hopefully they do. But this is an opportunity. To the CLP government, this is a great opportunity. Let's work with the new government to really leverage investment. Because at the end of the day, I just want more money to come into the territory. I don't care who's in government. I don't care. As long as we don't have to sell ourselves too much, we just want investment in the territory. We want the territory to grow. We want the territory to flourish. We want every Territorian to feel proud to be a Territorian. And if that means growing infrastructure, if that means more roads, places of significance. I know, you know, my partner is American and he loves coming back to Australia all of the time. That's why we call Australia home. We have defence. We've had a long relationship with defence. That's going to grow. We need to make sure that in all industries, the Commonwealth Government is working with us regardless of who they are, so that we get more money into the territory, because when we get more money into the territory, we can invest more. Great policies are coming out. Childcare, removing, those eligibility tests so that more families can get their kids into childcare. This is the stuff that actually we should all be celebrating and working with. I also do want to acknowledge, first and foremost, we have seen the first woman now leader of the coalition, Susan Ley. Girl power. Great to see a woman taking on that role. First time ever. I think she's got a big job ahead of her as well. But, of course, democracy works best when the principles of democracy are supported and when we have good measures in place to support those. We need healthy oppositions for governments. We need independence. We need to have those mechanisms to support. So this MPI is a moment to reflect our goal, regardless of what side of politics you sit on, all 25 people here, we should be trying as best we can to get more money from the Commonwealth into the Territory so that we can continue to make this the greatest place in Australia to live, work and play. I absolutely offer congratulations to the Albanese government. Well done, a good campaign that is bringing Australians together. We cannot afford to go down the American style of divisive politics and fake news. We're better than that. We are Australians, Madam Speaker, and that's what we should be doing it, the Australian way.
Member for Karama.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just before I start, I've just learnt not to leave my computer on this desk because it seems that both the member for Goyder and the member for Gwodja have actually borrowed parts of my speech. Different parts, may I say. But yeah, I can't believe it. Anyway, so be it. It's often worth saying it again and saying it again. Occasionally people understand it. Madam Speaker, what an interesting MPI to speak to. Surely we have more important things to discuss in this parliament. Like, how do we fix up the 8-year mess left to us by a disastrous NT Labor government? How do we reduce crime, rebuild our economy and restore our lifestyle? These are the issues that Territorians want us to tackle. But no, this Teletubby opposition wants us to dance around the sun god and talk about the recent federal election, and they fancifully claim that this reflects voter sentiment against this CLP government. Well, I guess I'll have to succumb to Lala's, Dipsy's, Poe's and Tinky Winky's wishes and speak on this irrelevant MPI. Madam Speaker, like most people, I fully respect the decision of the Australian people and congratulate Prime Minister Albanese and his team for being re-elected to government. And I hope that over the next 3 years, he can help rebuild the Australian economy and create a better future for all Australians, including those living in our regional and remote areas such as the Northern Territory. And despite the fanciful request this morning from the member for Nycliffe that we all abandon the opportunity to strategically develop the East Arm precinct, I hope our NT Labor opposition will join this CLP government in holding the new federal government to account to deliver on its promise to support this strategic development for our country, along with its commitment to support the development of the Arafura Resources Project in Central Australia. As the Assistant Minister for Health, I also hope that this Labor opposition will get their member for Lingiari, the Honourable Mariam Scrimgeour MP, to deliver on her election commitment made on the 26th of April 2022, namely federal funding for 500 new First Nations medical trainees, 30 new renal clinics and the doubling of the funding for rheumatic heart disease. And now that the federal and territory elections are over for a number of years, I know our government will look to work constructively with the new federal government to deliver positive outcomes for the Northern Territory. And I hope this pragmatic cooperation will be reciprocated by the new federal government. Why? because the development of the Northern Territory is in the national economic interests, including for our national security. Now, Madam Speaker, whilst we're looking at the federal election, let's reflect on the performance of the Greens. They have lost 3 of their 4 members in the House of Representatives, including their leader Adam Brandt from the so-called safe seat of Melbourne, where he had an 11% margin. Why did Australians vote against the Greens? Very simple, because they no longer understood what the Greens stood for. This was the party that now always wanted more than what was on offer, irrespective of the economic consequences. Australians could no longer accept this dogmatic approach of the Greens, which was, give us all we want or we will support nothing. They couldn't understand that many Australians recognise that something is better than nothing. And those Australians became fed up with academic, theoretical proposals divorced from economic reality. And as discussed yesterday, the Greens are backed up by and readily accept funding from a professional gambler. I do wonder how much he lost on backing the Greens this time. Madam Speaker, let me now turn to the NT result, and particularly for the seat of Solomon. Madam Speaker, there were certainly different issues at play in the federal election to that in the recent territory election. And with all due respect, there is no doubt there was a definite anti-Dutton sentiment impacting on the federal election across the nation. So let me, like the member for Guadja, congratulate all of the territory representatives elected to the new federal parliament, including the member for Solomon, Luke Gosling MP. And let me thank all candidates who stood and contested the election as part of our cherished democratic system. I would personally like to thank our wonderful CLP candidate for Solomon, Lisa Bayliss, who gave a full commitment to winning this seat and only just fell short in a very tight contest. Lisa, you were a fantastic candidate, and I would encourage you to run again in the 2028 election. Having said that, Madam Speaker, it is important to note that the Northern Territory was the only state or territory around the country that had a swing to the coalition, as the member of Goyder pinched from me. The country swung 2.8% to Labor, and realistically, Luke Gosling should have increased his margin like the rest of his Labor colleagues. Instead, he went backwards by 7.2%. I say again, went backwards by 7.2%. Coming into this federal election, Luke Gosling held the 32nd most marginal Labor seat, as we've already heard. But now in an election where Labor picked up 16 seats, Mr Gosling now has the 6th most marginal Labor seat. If we look at the results, the 3 booths in my electorate, Karama, saw primary vote swings of 8.8% in the Malak booth, 10.9% in the Karama booth and 13.6% in the Karama East booth to the CLP respectively. And the general assertion that a vote for an independent should be considered a vote for Labor proved true. But I'm sure Territorians won't be fooled again next time. I also note that the member for Solomon, Luke Gosling, as has already been mentioned, was quoted, "I'm really happy with the support I have from the Prime Minister, and he's certainly indicated to me that he sees me in an assistant ministerial position after this election." Well, well, well. It turns out if you perform badly and almost lose your seat, you don't get rewarded. And the Prime Minister seems to have quickly reneged on this promise to the member for Solomon. So we've only got to hope that he can build up his influence within his own party. Finally, Madam Speaker, whilst I appreciate that the NT Labor's opposition are celebrating the win by their federal colleagues, I caution them not to take this as a prediction for the next territory election. I advise the Leader of the Opposition that whilst focusing your attention on a win in Canberra sounds great, Unfortunately, it doesn't excuse your team for ignoring the residents in Karama, Malacca and Nucky Lagoon, and those residents won't forget this long-term neglect. I also recall that the member for Fanny Bay relayed this morning how many residents from the neighbouring electorates of Nightcliff and Johnson come to her for advice because they feel neglected in their own electorates. And I can also confirm that I've had similar experience with some of these residents coming to me, as they now wish they had a government member. And yes, we won a 17 majority at the last election. But none of my colleagues take that for granted, none of them. As I've mentioned in this assembly before, I personally walked the streets of Karama, Malacca and Nucky Lagoon to hand deliver my quarterly newsletter, allowing me to stay connected with my community along with all of my other engagement activities. My motto, which is printed everywhere on my signage, on my shirts and everything, is to be visible, to be accessible and to serve my community. I am fully committed to this. And I know my other government MLA colleagues are also fully connected with their electorates. And we are all committed to our plan. Here it is, our plan again. I'm going to put it up again. To reduce crime, rebuild our economy and restore our lifestyle. So yes, Madam Speaker, Labor had a victory in the federal election. But let's be honest, this NT Labor opposition has a long way to go to regain the trust of Territorians. And if they keep objecting to all the positive things we do and just trying to stymie it and say no, 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 then I'm sorry, I expect them to be further thrown out at the next election as well. So I do hope they change their tasks. I keep urging them to be constructive. I keep hearing that the Leader of the Opposition say, we're going to be great. You know, we're going to hold this government to account. That's fine. Holding us to account's fine, but don't get in the way of us delivering on our promise to Territorians and to our electorate. And I heard she also said she's going to come to estimates and she's going to get into things at estimates. That's great. So they should. But, you know, they seem to have a love affair with the member for Barkly, both the Leader of the Opposition and the member for Guadja. They both have a love affair with the member for Barkly. And they probably like him because he's so insightful and he's got a laser-like incisiveness in questioning people and looking at facts and figures. He actually reminds me of that wonderful federal speaker. I think it was the Honourable Bronwyn Bishop.
Oh.
And her attempts and her ability to get in to estimates and get drilled down to things. And I just think it's amazing. And I do want you, I certainly take on that. And if I'm involved in estimates, I'm going to use that as a bit of a role model. We're going to get in there and we're going to drill it. And we're going to hold people to account. But holding people to account is one thing. But don't get in the way of true progress and people really wanting to make... So on that note, I'll say thank you very much.
Member for Daly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for your remarks towards the member for Barkly being reminded of you of, what was it, Bronwyn Bishop, I think. I think that's a new one for us. I don't know if the member for Barkly is enjoying this or is a little bit embarrassed or blushed, but anyway, we'll know what we'll be calling out to the member for Barkly from now on, so we thank you for that. But what I find very concerning tonight is the member for Goyder coming in here. It's very disappointing that the member for Goyder has come in here to say that this isn't an important MPI, that tonight's debate around the federal election isn't an important MPI. I think this is very important for Territorians because, as we all know in this House, we actually have to work with the federal government. We have to lobby the federal government for funding It is all of our jobs, no matter what side of politics we're on, whether you're part of a CLP, whether you're a Labor member, whether you're an independent, whether you're a Greens member. I think it's in all of our interests that we are talking about this tonight. Because the fact of the matter is, we do heavily rely on the federal government for funding, for programs to be put here. And I think we all understand that basic concept. So for the member for Goyder to come in here and say that that isn't important, I find that quite disappointing for his remarks. And I do pick up that he was saying that the member for Lingiari, he doesn't see her very often, but he's seen her 5 times. But I will remind the member for Goyder that she has a huge electorate, pretty much all of the Northern Territory except for Darwin and Palmerston. All of the Northern Territory. And I can tell you right now, I've seen the member for Lingiari, Marion Scrimgeour, out more than Senator Price. Not once have I seen Senator Price out in Wadair. Not once have I seen Senator Price out in Daly River. Not once have I seen Senator Price in Pepperminardi, Palumpa, Pine Creek. Where's she gone? Where's she gone? Tamworth, at the Country Music Festival. I'm always in the rural area, mate. I live in the rural area, so, you know, you can come to Wagga Beach anytime, mate. I'm always there, so don't worry about where I am, because I'm always there. And, you know, I'll tell you one thing. When constituents come into my office in Berry Springs, I love meeting with my constituents in Berry Springs. But do you know what I always say? I always say, go and talk to government members too, because we should all be working together. We should always be working together. I say, yep, you should go and speak to your government members. They've got access to their ministers directly. But the member for Goyder, he doesn't like hearing the truth. No. He's sitting here interjecting.
Member for Goyder, desist, please.
He clearly has, a gripe to pick with me. I don't know why. I'm not sure why. It's maybe because I beat his friend Chris Sivatarese. That then went and worked in his office straight after the election. Straight after the election, he got a job with the member for Goyder. So there he is, he's protecting his mate, and that's what the CLP do. That's in their DNA. That is in their DNA, to go and protect their mates. So I'll remind the member for Goyder at this election the amazing achievement that happened out in the remote community of Daly. Do you know what we got, Leader of the Opposition?
I reckon you're going to tell her.
92%.
Can you address your question through the chair?
92% towards Labor. 92% towards Labor in Wadair. And do you know what was hilarious about this? I had 3 CLP members. Well, actually, I think they were from Brisbane. They weren't even from the Territory. Brethren, One Nation, disguised under CLP. Come and circle me and say, are you Dheran Young? And I said, yeah, welcome to Wadair. How can I help? And they said, we are just here to give people a choice. I said, of course. I'm glad you've made it, but you're 2 days late. Where were you the last 2 days in Wadair? You're 2 days late, so do you really care about people out here? No, I don't think so. They just flew their mates in from Brisbane. I didn't even see one local Territorian helping on that booth. And she was a great help for us. I'll thank her for that, don't you worry. I'll leave that with the CLP government. I was glad. I get on really well with her. She's one of my constituents. And I think the sad thing about all of it is a lot of people have ignored her. Yeah. But I will always talk to her. And that's what a good local member does. So I do have respect for her. You can call out and say that and laugh about her, but I don't think that's funny. I work with Caroline. She's come to my office. I see her all the time. So don't come in here and laugh at one of my constituents, because it's an absolute disgrace for the member for Goyder.
Yeah. Sorry, I think, can we stop the interjections and can you speak through the chair, please. Thank you. Let the member for Daly speak, please.
Point of order.
What's the point of order?
Standing order 31, disorderly. That wasn't me interjecting. The member for Daly said the member for Goyder was yelling. It wasn't me.
Look, it was both yourself, it was the member for Blaine, everyone. It's just a general thing. Thank you. So, enough. Continue.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I was about to call you Deputy Chief Minister. Deputy Speaker. Well, it could be. You never know when there's a roll after this federal election. But I do want to thank those members from the bush for coming out and voting Labor. 92% in Wadair. We also got an 82% for Labor in the West Daly region, which is absolutely amazing. 82% to Labor. But what's disappointing is that the accusations being slung in this House from the member for Goyder, Mr Deputy Speaker, that suggests there was any wrongdoing. And I suggest to the member for Goyder, if he believes that, you should report it to the Australian Electoral Commission through the right channels. That is the proper process. That is the right thing to do for them to investigate. But people out bush, they know who they're voting for because they know that Territory Labor will always look after them. They know that we will always look after them. And we hear the member for Catherine, you know, laughing over there, but I remind it 92% of the vote in Wadair. Silence. Crickets now. She's not laughing anymore because she knows it's true. That's right. And I'm just giving out the facts and the stats, what had happened out there. So I'm very proud of the work that our team have done as the Territory Labor opposition. I'm very proud of our current member for retaining her seat in Marion Scrimgeour and Senator Malandiri McCarthy. But what was disappointing was when I was in Daly River, actually, one of the CLP volunteers said, because I was just talking before that Senator Price hasn't been seen. She's gone. They said, well, member for Daly, have you invited her out here? I could not believe that a CLP volunteer asked me if I'd invited her out, suggesting that I need to tell her how to do her job, how to represent her constituents. I mean, that's what we're all elected here to do. The basic principle is to come here and represent our constituents. And yet they're suggesting to me that I've got to tell Senator Price how to do her job. It is a complete embarrassment that they think they need a Labor member to tell a CLP senator how to do her job, how to actually represent all Territorians. All Territorians. So, you know, we're always welcome to see any senator that represents the Northern Territory, including Malandiri McCarthy, who's been out to Wadair on a number of occasions with me. I've had Senator McCarthy out in Wadair. I've had Senator McCarthy out in the West Daly region with me on a number of occasions. But when it comes to Senator Price, she's not around.
Price isn't right.
She's interstate. She's not around.
Senator Price, Member for Barclay wants a special shout.
Can we...
Sorry, member for Barclay. No, but you know, the member for Barclay, I'll give him credit. He's there. He's taken selfies at all those new houses that are opening thanks to the Labor government that brought in the funding. So I'm still waiting for that invite from the member for Barclay to get behind his camera with him and get a selfie with the member for Barclay. I'm looking forward to the day, you know. I think he's just invited us down there, opposition leader, so we might head down there in a few weeks and get that selfie with the member for Barclay.
Member for Daly, can you conduct your love affair with the member?
Thank you. Sorry, Mr Deputy Speaker, I will put it through the chair. Thank you. But under the federal Labor government, we will see the NT is set to receive a 30% increase in hospital funding, amounting to $560 million in the 2025-2026, the largest percentage increase among all Australian jurisdictions. This funding aims to reduce emergency department wait times and cut surgical backlogs. We'll also see 8 medical urgent care clinics that have been established in communities, including Ali Karang, Galawinku, Lajamanu, Meningrida, Alice Springs, Palmerston, Wurrumiunga. These clinics have collectively handled over 50,000 visits, providing timely care and alleviating pressure on hospital emergency departments. Darwin will also get one in this term of the Federal Parliament, and that's a huge thanks to Luke Gosling for securing this. With the Albanese government re-elected, the future of Medicare and bulk billing are secured. They will make the single largest investment in Medicare since its creation over 40 years ago, with $8 billion to deliver an additional 18 million bulk billed GP visits each year, hundreds of nursing scholarships and thousands more doctors in the largest GP training program ever. Territory patients and families will save hundreds of dollars a year in out-of-pocket cost, with patient savings of $859 million by 2030. Labor's record investment restores the $8.3 billion the Australian Medical Association says was cut from Medicare through the funding freeze initiated by the Liberals and the CLP a decade ago. For the first time, Labor will expand bulk billing incentives to all Australians and create an additional new incentive payment for practices that bulk bill every patient. This will mean 9 out of 10 GP visits will be bulk billed by 2030. This is a huge deal for Territory families. Madam Speaker, the re-elected Albanese government will also invest $1 billion to expand free Medicare-backed mental health care. We'll see $225 million for 31 upgraded Medicare mental health centres, $200 million for 58 new or expanded headspace services, $500 million for 20 new youth specialist care centres for young people with complex needs. We'll see $90 million to train over 1,200 new mental health professionals. This investment includes upgrades to the Medicare Mental Health Centre in Alice Springs and the establishment of a new health specialist care centre and a Headspace Plus facility in Darwin, enhancing mental health service support for young Territorians. Labor is also investing in a new aged care facility in Darwin. A $60 million investment is allocated for constructing a new residential aged care home in Darwin, adding at least 120 new beds to address the city's critical shortage, the newest number of aged care beds in the country. This is, of course, after a decade of neglect by the Liberals and the CLP nationally that triggered the disgraceful findings of the Aged Care Royal Commission. The Malala Health Service Aboriginal Corporation in Meningrida will receive $12.8 million to upgrade and expand its aged care facilities, which I know the member for Arafura is very excited to hear that. And I believe you may have been out there for that announcement during the campaign. Yes, he was out there at Meningrida in his hometown. But just to finish off, Madam Speaker, as I've only got a minute to go, I do want to give a special thanks out on behalf of the Territory Labor government to an unexpected ally in our fight to retain our 2 seats at the election. I want to thank the Treasurer. Thank you for reminding all Territorians who actually sold the port a decade ago. As an issue, we thought this was one that was past its use-by date, but thank you once again for reminding all Territorians who made the ridiculous decision to sell the Port of Darwin. Maybe the CLP would have been better off sending the Treasurer fishing for a few more weeks down at the Daily in my beautiful electorate. But noting the massive swings against the CLP in your booze and the vigorous campaign you ran to remind all Territorians of the CLP's history of asset sales, we're grateful for the support you provided to the Territory Labor campaign. So on behalf of this side of the House, thank you, Comrade Bill.
Member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm going to shift the energy a little bit. Whilst I don't agree with the humility of a MPI on an election win, I will take the opportunity to congratulate our senators, Jacinta Price and Malandiri McCarthy, and congratulate them on their wins, and our MPs Luke Gosling and Mariam Scrimgeour for their re-election. I would like to speak tonight. Amongst the chaos, there's always opportunity, Madam Speaker, and in looking for what I could talk about tonight, I think it is something that we have clear bipartisan support on, and I would like to call on my Labor colleagues in the chamber to champion this along with our government and to the 4 territory representatives in Canberra, and that is on the importance of the NT and USA defence and strategic posturing and the alliance that we have fostered and grown with our US defence allies and the benefit the territory can offer them. And I raise this due to concerns that Canberra, Madam Speaker, for a while now has used defence posturing, has moved away from strategic military positioning and used it more as an electoral tool. And I would urge my to our American allies to make your decisions based on military strategy, not where the government of the day sees they can win most votes. And in that, I would like to draw the comparisons that Darwin and the Northern Territory offers our US allies, particularly over Townsville and Queensland, Madam Speaker. Darwin and the Northern Territory, its far superior geostrategic location. We are the gateway to the Indo-Pacific, and we have unmatched proximity to key maritime choke points. And this includes access to South China Sea, the Lombok Strait, and the broader archipelagic sea lanes of Southeast Asia. There is also readily accessible access through sea lanes to the Indian Ocean. All this is offered by Darwin, Madam Speaker. Darwin offers a far faster deployment into contested seas than any East Coast city in Australia offers. Darwin is 1,400 kilometres closer to Manila than Townsville. That's a 30% reduction, Madam Speaker. We are 1,800 kilometres closer to Taiwan, which offers 37% reduction. That's shorter times for humanitarian deployment and humanitarian aid. That's shorter deployments for training with our Southeast Asian neighbours, particularly with our Association of Southeast Asian Nations and their growing importance in the Southeast China, within the Indo-Pacific region, Madam Speaker. This offers more opportunities for joint naval training with these partners and allies, and also with Australian forces. We offer far greater operational flexibility, and this is offered by our vast airspace, our deep water sea access, and our training ranges that are free from commercial congestion, and particularly our low population density actually offers immense opportunity, especially in Air Force and land training, Madam Speaker. And on all these fronts, we outcompete Queensland. We outcompete Queensland on all these fronts, and that is something we can offer to our US allies. We have far greater force integration, with ADF and US integration is now decades ahead of anywhere else in the country. We've been hosting the Marines at Robertson Barracks since my first year as a lieutenant when I walked in, Madam Speaker. That is how long that relationship has been fostered. Here in Darwin, we are used to having our Marines here. We have bipartisan support in this chamber for their presence, and we welcome them every year on their rotation. So there is that humongous advantage there that we offer to our US counterparts. We have existing interoperability protocols and joint exercises already established here in the Northern Territory, both in land, air and sea training exercises. We also host large-scale training exercises for allies across the Southeast Asian region, both in air and navy, Madam Speaker, and there is even growing land force interoperability that we are seeing across the region. Darwin is the natural continuation of the Guam, Tyndall, Darwin, Diego Garcia arc. This offers our forces and our US allies a forward defence posture that supports dispersed basing and decreased strategic vulnerabilities. This is all offered by investing here in the Northern Territory. These bases are also less cyclone prone than our Queensland counterparts. Tyndall in particular offers a far superior safety from any natural damages that could occur, and we already have established rapid refill and rearm for long-range operations across the Indo-Pacific. And this all already exists, again, far superior than it is on the East Coast. Despite what you may see at times in the chamber, we offer complete political stability here in the Northern Territory, Madam Speaker. And we offer complete bipartisan support to our US presence here in the Northern Territory. You will not find that support anywhere else as strong as it is here in the Northern Territory. We have not had the community backlash or political weaponisation as we have seen across the East Coast. This offers a much less risky environment for US investment. The CLP government is very pro-defence, and we are very pro the Australian-US alliance, and I know too that the Labor opposition are very pro this US alliance and investment here as well. So we must, all of us here in this chamber, and I call on all four of our representatives, to counter Canberra's centralisation of where they think the US needs to be, because I see a concerning trend that their decision-making is influenced more by electoral politics rather than military strategy. To our US allies here in Darwin and the Northern Territory with Tyndall, we provide the best military strategic option for you in Australia, and in doing so offer you a stable and safe investing platform for posturing to Southeast Asia, which will only increase throughout this century. We also offer the historical importance that Darwin has been. We have long been a military town and we have industry to support it, Madam Speaker. And I will say this, there was a reason Japan came here in World War II. You can learn things from your enemy. The Japanese Navy knew this was of strategic importance. It's why they came here after Pearl Harbor. And for the same reason, we must see the investment in Darwin to maximise that strategic importance. It is in our DNA. We're the front line of a shared commitment to the Indo-Pacific for peace, prosperity and deterrence. And I hope tonight to call on all parties of the Northern Territory and all our federal counterparts to combat Canberra pushing our US allies into other states and ensure that they come here to the Northern Territory where we will welcome them with open arms and for greater peace and certainty throughout our region. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any more speakers on the MPI? Member for Arafura.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This federal election was tougher than it needed to be on our Aboriginal people and communities across the Territory. Instead of having a battle on competing ideas and investing in the bush, strange and outdated culture wars were being fought. We did not need to have a debate about welcome to country during the election campaign. This was a debate about, the debate started from the Anzac Day parade ceremony in Melbourne. I don't know where, actually. Neo-Nazi was, interrupting. As a parliament, we should all agree that the important issues we debate should not be dictated by by what neo-Nazis think. Welcome to countries and acknowledgement of countries are respectful and welcoming, but they are optional, and it's always up to the event organisers and planners if they occur. Now, in regards to welcome to country, in my electorate, TV Island has all communities doing welcome in Tiwi, but every other community is from a different language, different clan group. That's why it's so important. This is not controversial. It reflects the overwhelming majority view of Territorians. We should be proud of our Indigenous. As someone who have served in the Army as well, I respect the right of RSLs and councils across the country on Anzac Day ceremonies and applaud those who include welcomes and acknowledgements. Across the territory, there are real fears and anxieties that people have. Things like, so the real issues, how are we going to pay rent week in, week out? How are we going to afford medical treatment? Why are there so many wars going on around the world? These are real fears. But for some reason, the biggest thing from the National Liberal was standing in front of the Indigenous flag. This is bizarre fear to have, and I hope that this election taught us something as Australians. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the work led by Linda Burney, Malandiri McCarthy, and Marion Scrimgeour. Let's look forward. Wait there. They have invested $774 million in remote jobs and economic development programs for Indigenous community. We're set to create up to 3,000 jobs over 3 years, with more than 100 employees establishing an initial 650 new jobs. They will expand the Indigenous Rangers program federally. The program includes over 1,000 new ranger jobs with 700 positions for First Nations women and funding for additional 800 ranger positions to support environmental stewardship and cultural preservation. One of the funding which I am most proud of is the $4 billion joint investment announced to build homes over the next 10 years. A game changer for all of us and something that will create a decade of jobs for Territorians. 840 over 6 years to improve service delivery in remote communities. This funding will support policing, women's safety, children's health, education, alcohol harm reduction, and Aboriginal interpreter services. I note that the Chief Minister announced that Prime Minister earlier this year, I note that the Chief Minister announced with the Prime Minister earlier this year a demonstration of federal Labor's desire to improve territory, irrespective of who governs in this chamber. A $99 million investment in First Nations justice initiatives focuses on justice reinvestment programs to reduce incarceration rates and improve community safety. This is long-term investment Territorians have been crying out to help break the cycle of criminal reoffending. In 2025, the Commonwealth will also invest in a range of new measures, reduce the cost of 30 essential products in over 76 remote community stores to help ease the cost of living pressures and improve food security in remote communities. Build a nutrition workforce in remote communities by upskilling up to 120 local First Nation staff in remote stores. Roll out new laundries and upgrade existing facilities and 12 remote First Nations community to help improve long-term health outcomes. Strengthening the Indigenous procurement policy to boost opportunities for First Nation businesses. Increase the opportunities for First Nations Australians to buy their own home and build integrational wealth through a boost of Indigenous IBA home loan capital. Establish a place-based business coaching and mentoring program for First Nation businesswomen and businessmen. Increase the availability of cultural safety and qualified mental health support, including scholarships for up to 150 First Nations. Continue to deliver preventable early intervention and response services to address family, domestic and sexual violence in high-need First Nations communities. Extend the Territory Stolen Generation Redress Scheme. Continue digitalization of at-risk audio and video collection held by First Nation broadcasters of Community Organisation Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. No federal government has ever done more to support remote territory, and this investment will help generations of Territorians escape poverty and put them in a position to build a better community and stay within their communities and build up their communities. I just want to finish off just a member for Goira, very passionate speech. We know it's your birthday, you probably miss happy hour, so happy birthday, mate, and go and relax. Cheers.
Are there any other speakers for the MPI? If that be the case, then we will move on. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the Assembly do now adjourn.